Although the plague has existed in Iran for centuries, analysts of plague outbreaks over time has been hampered by incomplete data, inaccurate documentation, the misclassification of the plague as a different infectious disease like cholera, and the way that the plague has interacted with social dynamics. Throughout history, plague outbreaks in Iran have occurred regularly, although their exact timing and nature are still unknown. Lack of effective quarantine measures, a deficient public health system, washing the dead bodies in rivers before burial, and moving corpses to holy locations, Qom, Najaf, and Karbala, may have contributed to the plague's rapid spread and high mortality rates. The entirety of modern-day Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, Armenia, Turkey, and Syria, as well as portions of Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the Caucasus, Central Asia, and Egypt were historically included in the Persian Empire's realm. Iran is a Middle Eastern nation that is north of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman and south of the Caspian Sea. Iraq, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Afghanistan, and Pakistan are border neighbors. Iran is the 18th largest country in the world by area, covering 1,648,000 kilometers squared, or 636,000 square miles. The majority of Iran's sporadic yearly precipitation falls between October and April due to its fluctuating desert environment. A total of 7% of the country is covered by trees. Rural epidemics in Iran have been observed to linger for durations of 30 to 40 years without any formally documented cases, and they often originate from villages or unhygienic locations. Nearly all areas of the nation have seen plague outbreaks throughout history, particularly those that are close to borders in the north, south, east, and west. The plague originated in Italy and traveled through Syria, Palestine, and Iraq before arriving in what is now modern-day Iran in 543 CE, infecting both the people and the Persian royal army at the time. The Roman Empire and the Persian Empire both had troops at war at 544 CE when they were both affected by the plague. The Sasanian city of Ctesiphon near Baghdad was reported to have experienced a significant plague epidemic in 627 CE that claimed more than 100,000 lives. Shiria, the Persian king, passed away shortly after as a result of the plague. In the lands of Yezdijurg III, the great king of Persia, a second plague outbreak spread from 634 to 642 CE. The Amwas plague, also known as Amawas, which killed up to 25,000 people in Syria and Palestine in 638 or 639 CE, may also go by the name of the Yezdijurg plague, one of the multiple plague outbreaks that occurred in the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries after the most significant pandemic of the 6th century. The Justinian plague is the Amwas plague. However, it appears that the plague continued to spread throughout Persia, remaining endemic after the outbreaks of 689 until the middle of the 13th century. To the best of our knowledge, there is no concrete documentation of plague outbreaks or the impact of the plague on Persia between 689 and 1270 CE. The Sistan and Balochistan provinces in southeast Iran saw a plague epidemic in 1906, but it only affected the areas close to the Sistan Lake. It is thought that old garments brought from India spread the illness to this region. People abandoned the city of Bashar in southern Iran during the plague epidemics between 1910 and 1911, which had a detrimental economic effect. The plague returned to Bashar in 1912 and 1913, resulting in 750 fatalities and 4,000 vaccines. The subsequent outbreak of the sickness didn't affect Bashar until 1924. The disease likely began in India because the majority of cases in the Persian Gulf region occurred in the first half of the 20th century. Two Iranian provinces saw outbreaks in 1913, Khorasan in the east and Kurdistan in the west. In 1924, Khorramshahr and Abadan in southwestern Iran were the sites of a plague outbreak. Following an 8-year period without a case being documented, the disease returned to Torbadi Jam in Khorasan. In the southern region of the country, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, an English firm, was aggressively mining petroleum while some of the plague outbreaks took place there. This company's action had a significant influence on the local plague's ability to be controlled. In 1925, 4,553 people in southern Iran received the first dose of the plague vaccine. Houses were sanitized, and whenever a new case of the illness was discovered, serious measures were taken, including the washing of all clothing, isolation of the patient, destruction of the home with compensation, and a ban on construction on the site. Due to the sparse population, great distances, and a lack of communication tools, cases of interhuman transmission of plague that originated in villages tend to disappear quickly. However, when introduced into a city with a greater concentration of people, plague can quickly revert to the dreadful illness it was in the Middle Ages. In Kurdistan, the last official mention of a plague epidemic dates to 1966. The idea of burrowing the plague was one of the most important discoveries made as a result of these experts' research in Kurdistan. It has been demonstrated that Y. pestis can survive for a number of years in the burrows of dead rats before reinfecting the young rodents that move into these abandoned burrows. In addition to the well-known rodent-flea-rodent cycle, they demonstrated the existence of the burrow-rodent-burrow cycle, allowing the plague bacillus to be preserved in academic foci between epizootics. Studying wild rodents in the area around the plague, focused in Kurdistan, allowed researchers to identify the epizootic center in Sarab, eastern Azerbaijan province, north of the plague's stated focus in Kurdistan. According to the Pasteur Institute of Iran's tracking of the plague in Kurdistan, the illness vanished for 3 to 5 years in its natural foci before resurfacing in rodent host. In addition to the US, India, Brazil, Argentina, South Africa all reported the same conclusion. After a severe drought significantly reduced the amount of water in the nation's largest reservoir, archaeologists discovered the ruins of a 3,400-year-old lost city in Iraq, complete with a palace and a massive fort. The Tigris River has long since swallowed the Bronze Age hamlet, which was discovered earlier this year in the Mosul Dam. Researchers hurried to unearth the historic city before the dam was refilled. The find is only the most recent illustration of how dry circumstances brought on by climate change are resulting in unexpected discoveries. Only last month, a pair of old skeletal remains were discovered in Lake Mead, Nevada, due to declining water levels. German and Kurdish archaeologists worked together to chronicle the ancient city of Iraq, which was discovered in the Kurdistan region at a place called Kimyun. Ivana Polchis, a member of the research team and a junior professor of Near Eastern archaeology at the University of Freiburg in Germany, believes that the settlement was probably an important center during the Mitanni Empire, which existed between 1550 and 1350 BC. According to Polgis, the city may have played an important role in connecting the core region of the Mitanni Empire, which was located in modern-day northeastern Syria, and the empire's eastern periphery because it was located directly on the Tigris. An aerial image of the Kimyun excavations show partially submerged Bronze Age buildings. The fortified outposts still existing ruins included the University of Freiburg and Tübingen KAO towers, a grand palace, and a number of other sizable structures. The ancient city of Zakaku, which once bustled as the region's political hub, is believed to have been the location of the settlement, according to archaeologists. Despite being made of sun-dried mud bricks, the researchers noted that the fortress walls, which may reach heights of several meters in some locations, are remarkably well preserved. Researchers claim that an earthquake that struck the region around 1350 BC destroyed the Bronze Age city. The majority of the structures that survived the natural disaster, they continued, were likely buried by upper portions of the walls, keeping them in a reasonably good state for millennia. During the excavation of Kimyun, 5 clay jars containing more than 100 cuneiform scripted tablets were also found. The objects originate from the Middle Assyrian period, just after the tragic earthquake, and according to scholars, may be some kind of ancient correspondence. In the corner of a Middle Assyrian-era room are pottery jars that were used to hold cuneiform tablets. According to Peter Fitzner, director of the Department of Near Eastern Archaeology at the University of Tübingen in Germany and a member of the study team, it is almost a miracle that cuneiform tablets made of unfired clay survived so many decades underwater. The archaeological site was found after water levels in the Mosul Dam were lowered starting in December to prevent crops from drying out. The region has experienced both a persistent drought and low rainfall due to climate change. The archaeologists hurried to map and excavate as much of the ancient city as they could while it was still exposed during the months of January and February. In the lab of the excavation team in Duhok, a researcher carefully removes the cuneiform tablets from an unsealed clay vessel. Since it was unclear how much time we would have and when the water would rise again, Poole just said, "We were under a lot of pressure." A highly motivated and committed staff that worked essentially constantly for several weeks in all types of weather, including snow, rain, fog, hail, and storms, is responsible for the excellent outcomes. According to Polges, scientists known about the old city for some time, but since the Mosul Dam was built in the 1980s, the area had been continuously submerged. When a portion of the village briefly resurfaced in the area due to drought in 2018, Polges and her colleagues were able to unearth some of the palaces. She claimed that she started to have doubts that the edifice was a component of a much larger metropolis at Kimyun during that fieldwork. The Mosul's reservoir's water level didn't unexpectedly drop for the first time in 3 years until mid-December 2021, according to her. "My coworkers and I realized right away that we were running out of time. The archaeologists filled the area with gravel and covered the ancient settlements' ruins in plastic to help preserve them. This, they claim, will safeguard the unbaked clay walls. According to Pulges, since February, the dam's water levels have been gradually rising and the city is once again underwater. When it will re-emerge, it's totally unpredictable, she said. The only thing that is certain is that when the time comes, both my colleagues and I will be there again. This finding highlights how important information can be learned from archaeological research in areas affected by climate change, because shifting water levels can reveal undiscovered historical sites. Regardless, what do you think? We would like to know in the comment sections below.